Hello and welcome to the I Love Claims Home and Commercial Claims webinar series. And today we're going to be taking another look at Escape of Water and all the challenges that places upon us. And that's something we've been looking at from two previous webinars as well. But first of all, as always, I'd like to say a big thanks to our corporate partners, without whom we couldn't be running a lot of these free-to-air webinars. So to CoreLogic, to Carpenters, Innovation Group, iCab, SafeLine, Sitecall, and of course Synergy. Big thanks for your support. We really, really appreciate it. A couple of ILC plugs to get on with as well. One's a bit of an exciting plug, but you have to wait for it because the return of the ILC Home and Commercial Lunch on the 1st of October is now completely booked out. So unless you're going to get a nice invite from one of the 40-odd table holders, please let us know. Go to rachel@iloveclaims.com to go on the waiting list because that might be required. That's the 1st of October. And on the 11th of November, the return of the ILC conference, we're really looking forward to that. We'll have about 450 claims professionals attending this at the Ricoh Arena in Coventry. Anything you want to know about that, it's alan@iloveclaims.com. If you're looking at sponsorship packages, my colleague Nick at Nick NIC at nick@iloveclaims.com will be able to help you. Or just get in contact with us through the website or whatever we'd like to do it. So that over. I have three guests today going to help us look at Escape of Water. Ian Mars from Saga, Sam Dawson from Belfor UK, and Mike Devaney from SureStop. And when we've been taking a look at the Escape of Water, we've taken a look at what makes it up. We know that a lot of this is to do with the number of bathrooms and taps in a house now. And now that we're seeing house building seeming to be in the increase everywhere you go, they're still building them with 3 stories as far as I can see. They're still building them with lots of bathrooms as far as I can see. So the issue is going to be with us for a while. We also looked at how we can manage through the process, and we identified there's no real silver bullet for doing this other than hard work and taking a careful look. But one of the things we haven't looked at in great detail yet is the prevention and mitigation aspects of this. And we've been talking about that for quite some time, really. So today we're going to look at the aspects of the claim that may be able to be mitigated. Why is it taking so long for prevention or mitigation technology to really be engaged within the industry? I think that's probably an economic question. So with all the tight margins that we have, how can we calculate the economic equations, prevention, mitigation, and the eventual claims cost, and the premium cost? And at the end of that, what we're trying to do here is just move forward with what's practical and realistic. We know there are amazing technological things that can be done, but they don't come free. So we've got to look at some steps to do that first. So that's what we're going to do with the guys. But I guess first thing, let's do a bit of catching up. Let's go to Ian first. Always a good source of information, what's happening in the claims world. Ian, first of all, can you give us an update on where we are with Escape of Water and its effect in the pandemic? We've talked about that before. And then perhaps where you think this can be mitigated.
Yeah, sure. With regards to looking at claims frequencies and loss ratios on Escape of Water, definitely during the pandemic, we saw that claims frequencies remained fairly static. But what obviously was fairly evident that the actual extent of the damage, which would be your loss ratio or our indemnity spend, has come down. Obviously, the customer's going to be at the property more. They're not going to be travelling to work. They're not going to go on holiday. All of these factors that would normally have an impact on costs and frequency are not happening. So first answer to your question, claims frequencies remain fairly the same for Escape of Water, but indemnity spend, how much they're costing us, has actually slightly reduced. Going forward, obviously, a couple of more facts really, I think, basically, which would be good to actually discuss, is that, you look at some of the events that we have. So the last big sort of Escape of Water event that we had was the freeze up of 2018. Now, when we looked at our customers and we looked at the claims that were coming through, probably 80% of those claims is where our customers have gone away. So they might have gone away for a long weekend. They might have gone off to Spain for 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, we've got cruise liners, and they actually may be on a cruise somewhere, which is nice and warm. And obviously, that's the sort of time of the year that you want to get out of the UK. So what's immediately apparent to us is that, if mitigation can be put into customers' property, especially when we have those incidents where we have a freeze up, definitely it can actually mitigate the loss. Then obviously we start getting into the actual cost element. Oh, you're mute.
There you go. I always do that first, aware of how relaxing it makes the rest of the day when you inevitably do it at some point as well, but it is helpful. Sam, I know from you're involved in the commercial aspects of insurance and the commercial claims, which do take up a heck of a lot of understandably domestic situations in terms of rentals, etc. So from your aspect, I know you've taken a look at prevention in a different way. I'm not saying in an opposing with what we've talked about before, but you've taken to talk to customers about what they can do, etc. What are you finding through, is it risk assessments or some of the issues that you're taking through?
Thanks, Alan. Remember to take my mute button off there. Thank you. So I think for us, it's changed in the last few months, the last few years in particular, because we have started doing the in-house end-to-end property claim solution, where we brought some of those tradespeople in-house, and it's opened up some opportunities for us to get involved in different parts of the claim, but then also offering solutions to customers. And one of those was something which we hadn't really engaged in before, but starting to look at now, and it's kind of condition reports on specifically looking at escape of water risks on multi-tenanted buildings. So this is coming from property management companies, generally via insurers and broker type involvements. But it's looking at, identifying potential areas of risk before they occur, and there's opportunities to remediate that and put them right. So you're trying to prevent the damage in the first instance, which is quite new for us. Obviously, we're heavily involved on the claims side. And you're dealing with things once they've happened. So it's nice to start looking on the other side of the fence and seeing how we can provide some solutions to help those customers. And there's quite an appetite, I have to say. Obviously, escape of water is obviously a massive amount of the volume and the value of the claims that we see across the board, whether it be domestic or commercial for that matter. So there's definitely an appetite to look at it, and there's definitely a hunger to try and find some solutions out there, and quite pleased to be getting involved with them at this point in time.
It is a big area, that's for sure. And often we've looked at this domestically just from an owner's perspective than a multi-owner's perspective. Mark, I guess it's your stop. You've got a lot of experience in social housing and etc., as well as perhaps NHS, etc. So how do you, let me look at it. Are you able to size or say where the major mitigation comes from in some of the products that are sold in your part of the industry?
Hi, Alan. Yeah, so the product for us is really the ease of access. It's the remote switch where the physical switch is visible, so you're not looking for the stopcock, or the stopcock might be seized, or it's in an accessible place. That time, all during that leak, is causing extra damage. So the quicker you can get in there, the quicker you can turn the water off, the better. We do work with adaptation companies and things like that for the elderly or for people with restricted movement. So as I say, with the product range we offer, some of those are app enabled, so you can turn the water off through a Wi-Fi app from a smart device. We've also got a system where if it detects a leak and the floor becomes wet, and the leak detection senses there's a leak there in the property, will automatically turn the water off and then send you a notification even if you're not in the property, and then you can go and get that repaired. So it's that we can't stop the escape of water, but what we can do is actually reduce the cost of the repair by being able to turn the water off swiftly and in a timely manner. That's where we're coming from. So
okay,
that's where we are.
I mean, just to back up Mark's point there from a restoration perspective, and I'm sure Ian will support this as well. Obviously, if you can limit the extent of water that's being leaked and going into the property, that's going to have a massive impact in terms of minimising and trying to reduce the costs all the not just the direct costs from the damage caused by the extent of water coming out, but additional costs like alternative accommodation and things like that. So being able to cut off that water straight away is an absolute no-brainer from my perspective. And this is where I have to touch wood. I've never been in a position where I've had to turn off my stopcock in an emergency, but I have attempted to do it on a number of occasions in peace times, and it's tricky. So yeah, it's a bit of a no-brainer from my perspective in terms of trying to reduce the costs, trying to reduce the impact of those losses in terms of life cycle and impact on customers as well.
Well, I have to be honest, I would love to see you go and test it, but I'd have to find out where the heck it was first, which probably is the case for many, many people. So Ian, I know you do stuff like this. We've had a different conversation and you look at this sort of stuff, but why is it taking us so long to get engaged in some of this? We've called it prevention. It's mitigation, really. It's prevention of a bigger claim. Why is it taking the industry so long to get with some of the technology that's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah. Firstly, I think obviously with the actual SureStop product, so just let Mark know I have it in my house and the switch is by the front door. So as I go out the front door on holiday, I can switch my water off, and it is great to do that. We had a recent claim, and I'll give you another little analogy, where we had an elderly lady. She had a leak from a toilet upstairs, quite a major leak. Got her son round, who lives quite locally. He obviously wanted to isolate the water supply, so he went downstairs and he found it hidden behind the actual sink unit. And unfortunately, while he was turning it off, because it hadn't been turned off for 10 years, it snapped. So you can imagine the actual extent of water that was actually coming out in that property from two sources. And he had to get the fire brigade out eventually to actually turn the water off outside of the property. So I think obviously with regards to what Mark said about the actual manual switch, it's a great idea. It's very visible. It's easy to gain access to. And then hopefully, it's actually going to mitigate the loss. We're doing a pilot at the moment. We are doing a pilot of the next generation of the actual water devices. I think it's actually might have been connected to Mark as well, utilising how they actually shut the supply down. What we're finding out with our customers is that those have recently gone through, and I'm going to use the word trauma, of a very large escape of water claim. Snap it up, absolutely snap it up. It's a device to sit there. It's a powered device. It's got Wi-Fi connected to it, etc. With regards to the industry, a simple manual water lock device is I don't think is a lot of cost. I think it's about £25-30. But once you start getting into the powered systems with Wi-Fi attached to them, etc., you're looking something on close £300. Now, with regards to an insurer, if you've got, I don't know, say 750,000 policyholders, what policyholders' properties do you put that into? You've got a cost of £300 per unit going in, and then you actually look at the economics to say, well, that customer may not be with us next year. They may have moved on to another insurer. So with regards to the take of the insurers, I think there's an appetite there, but trying to look at the economies of putting this into a property, and actually indeed what property do you put it into? Because if you're going to put it into all properties, very, very expensive, especially when that particular policyholder could leave us at renewal and then go with another insurer. So I think from the insurer's perspective on take-up, probably economics is the reason why.
Mark, how economic can it be to put in the simplest solution, for example? Because, as Ian's pointed out, it might be expensive for the insurer, but we don't know if there isn't some advantage to pricing if the policyholder could put it in themselves, and we could demonstrate possibly that's slightly at risk. Might help. I'm not an underwriter. He hastens to add very quickly, but it might help with the price. So is there a low-cost solution within the market that can give you a reasonable return for it?
Yeah, well, we see the product range we have. We have a single product which can replace the actual stopcock or just go above that, which is a physical switch, which is not brass. It's easy to turn on and off. Then the second type we do has got a remote switch, which works on water pressure. It just looks like a light switch, which is why people think it's electric. You can put that up to 2 meters or a maximum of 6 meters away from our stopcock. So that switch can be positioned anywhere. And the cost of the 2 meter version, we see that going out into the market from most merchants at about £50, including VAT. There's some chains out there, about £53, including that. So there's a solution to that. And as I say, if that does reduce the cost of repair, the cost of damage, the peace of mind, and everything else, then why wouldn't you? But also the IoT version, which is the iWater control, is about £300. As I say, if you've got a family member who's not here, or you've got an elderly parent that you want to be able to make sure you can turn the water on and off in a timely fashion, you can do that through the app. So again, that gives you the peace of mind that if you're not in that property, or you've got a second home, or you are going away at Christmas, or you're away for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, you can turn that water on, you can turn that water off at that time through the app. So there's different types, but the cheaper version would be about £50 cost, and then the installation fee on top of that. So that's where we sit in the market.
Okay. Sam, from your perspective then, let's take a look at I think we will eventually look at the viability of all of this in a homeowner's claim. But if we're looking at multi-rental buildings commercially, where I guess the chances of the leak are higher because you get a lot of properties in one building, and therefore the potential damage is greater. Is there more of a cost-benefit analysis that would support some form of mitigation going into these buildings with some of the risk assessments you're doing?
I think if we just consider for a second that escapable water claims are by far and away the biggest proportion of losses in the property claims, and the cost is the biggest, as we all know, there's a huge opportunity here to do things like the Sure Stop devices, and you can tackle it one of two ways. One, once the horse is bolted, like we talked about, Ian said there's quite a big uptake or desire from policyholders to install these devices when they've had that trauma and understand what can be the resultant effects from it. Then they're probably more likely to put it in place. There's also the opportunity to do something in advance. It's obviously maybe a lot more harder, and there's some trickier commercial models or decisions to be made out of that. But I think there's some real opportunities here for maybe forward-thinking insurance companies and providers, scheme managers, whoever, to start thinking about providing resilient solutions to customers. You're in that kind of same territory as the flood resilient rebuilding works that we're talking about. Who pays for it? I think the difference with this particular product is the cost is significantly lower, so there's a better opportunity to absorb those costs commercially. I think if we're talking about trying to keep hold of customers, and particularly in certain market target groups there who are likely to be more loyal and stick with their insurers, you could probably think about trying to wrap up that product into an offering, say, okay, buy your insurance with us, we'll fit you with some devices that will significantly reduce the potential of you having an escapable water claim, or if you do have an escapable water claim, the extent of that damage is going to be far reduced, much lower. So the costs are going to be cheaper, the disruption is going to be much less. So if there's some commercial model where the policyholder and the insurer decide to take some of those costs up front and maybe reduce them over a period of time, you could think about trying to increase your renewals over years. But we're looking at ways in which we can provide those solutions and come up with innovative ways with our customers, which are, before the whole horse is bolted, traditionally we've always managed claims once it's happened, but we've got our commercial Red Alert product, which is the pre-incident corporate response program. So it's not totally new to us, and we're always looking to try and offer those full end-to-end solutions. So yeah, this is certainly something which we're looking at and seeing if there's ways to structure it in. When we've dealt with an escapable water claim, the costs for the providing this kind of solution are going to be significantly reduced if you've already got tradespeople on site. You know, the biggest element of the cost is going to be the installation. So if the guys are already there, why not install one of these devices as part of the service offering and provide that added value at a much cheaper rate?
And there certainly are commercial opportunities there to help people manage the risk, going on from several things. And of course, Ian, who said he uses such a product himself, you know, there are also other marketing advantages once somebody's had it to be able to offer them the product, because they don't want to go through the same trauma as Ian puts it again. But then that moves us on to another area where SAGA lead the way, is looking at how we cope with vulnerable policyholders. And I guess there's a well, we have regulators never been looking at that in the same way, but SAGA look at it because they are market leaders in that area. How do you really look at this as an ability to offer or try and price in stuff like this as best as you can in places where you're insuring vulnerable homes?
Yeah, obviously we're looking at the vulnerability of the customers all the time, and that's obviously why we're actually doing this pilot at the moment, just to really understand what the actual take up is going to be of our customer base. We're looking obviously just to do a bit of a soft sell. So as we said beforehand, that's obviously where customer has had an escape of water claim and they've been impacted. And obviously we're looking at a hard sell base to see those people that haven't had an escape of water claim, what is the take up by them. And, you know, even obviously in the age group that we have, very, very reluctant. I think they think we're trying to reduce the amount that we're going to be paying as an insurer, which is not the case. As you know, we all have target loss ratios and target claims frequencies. So, you know, if we can actually do something that actually reduces one peril, like escape of water, you know, that will ultimately feed back into premiums in the long term. I think one of the major selling points we've actually had at the moment, especially of the actual wired device, is that obviously once you've actually installed it, I think Mark mentioned this as well, you know, you can have as many mobile phone numbers as you want attached to the device. And obviously we've had a couple of chats with our customers, you know, and their sons and daughters, and they like the idea of that. That if something actually is going on or happening at the property, it's going to alert them to the fact that something's going on. May not just be an escape of water. It could be something else, obviously, because quite a few of these have got artificial intelligence in, so they actually start to work. They start to look at what's normal. So that actually was a really good selling point as well. But it's a little bit like smoke alarms, isn't it? How many decades did it get us to get customers to put smoke alarms into their property? We all knew what the benefit was, obviously saving lives, which was the main one, but it's taken a long time, you know. And a thought here is that I know that when you've got high-rise buildings, new builds, they are putting these devices in there quite often. It's not automatic, but it's quite often. So we've come across quite a few new high builds where they're actually putting these devices in. So, you know, do we need to look at it from a building rig perspective? You know, smoke alarms is compulsory. We're looking at modern methods of construction and flooding. Escape of water, as you know, is always in the background. And obviously, Sam, it's definitely, if you want to look at our indemnity spend, it's escape of water. Other than obviously we actually have a big weather event coming through, but it is predominantly escape of water. So, you know, thought process is that should it be included in building regulations? As you've actually got thermal, electrics, gas, fire, is it something actually that the government starts to look at?
Well, within that, because that's a very good point. You know, should this become more of the smart homes revolution that goes on? And I don't know if you, in your industry, you've been in discussions with government officials and elsewhere about looking at this environmentally as well. You know, we have a lot of environmental focus coming up in insurance. That's going to be looked at very, very carefully in our conference in November, because there is new environmental legislation. And obviously there are environmental responsibilities anyway. So is there any view to the impact? Obviously there's impact on the environment, because we struggle with water sometimes, don't we, etc. So is it part of that revolution, somewhere between smart homes and environmental?
Well, for us, it's touching on a couple of things there that Ian said. The AI version is very, very good, because that'll give you water usage, and that'll give you the sort of thing Ian quite rightly said there, was if you've got an elderly parent, or you've got a community housing with elderly in there, it will monitor each individual property or your parent's property. And if they get up every day and they're flushing the toilets at 8:30 and the cup of tea's going on and the kettle and things like that, that remembers that. So by 10 a.m. in the morning, if nobody's been moving around that property and flushing the toilets and putting the kettle on, that then can text you and say, there's been no water usage for this amount of time. So that will alert you to a possible issue. It will also go the other way, where it will recognise water usage, and if it fills a bath and it's so many litres and it takes so long to fill it, if it recognises that there's mains water pressure going into that single property over and above the normal use, it will automatically turn the mains water off. It will then signal you it's turned the mains water off, and why, as an overuse of water. So we see that saving water as well, which is the environmental part. We don't want to be wasting water. When you've got multiple properties, whether that be multi-storey flats and multiple occupancy, if there's a leak in one of those flats, how do you find out which one it is? Because it's normally a mains going in and that feeds to the others. Where with this system, our iWater control system, you can put that in each individual flat, an apartment. You can turn each individual one off through the apartment number and postcode. So you can have, if there's some occupied and some unoccupied, you can have the occupied ones running and the unoccupied with the pressure water turned off, so you know there's no leaks in there. And it's that sort of thing for us. But also getting back to what Ian said earlier about retaining that customer for the year or multiple years. And we thought about how we could do that. And now there's a couple of things. You could get the home owner tenant to buy the products and have it fitted, and then give them a small premium reduction for 2 or 3 years to recoup that money back. We see some insurance companies offering a escape of water access, which is a little bit higher than normal. You could reduce that if there's a sure stop fitted in that property. There's different ways of doing it to tie them in. If you wanted to tie them in, as if you have this fitted by us, you remain to be with us for 3 years, or you pay the installation and product cost. Or the other way is they fit it, they pay the cost, and you give them a premium relief. There's ways of doing that to keep them going. But as I say, for us, it's that thing that will always be a leak. But if you can knock that down by 2/3 and reduce that cost to service and repair, that is where we're coming from. That is the main thing for us. And it's the waste of water during that time as well. So back to the environment. So
I think that's the key point. Sorry to jump in there. I think that's the key point, is if you're probably not going to be able to reduce the frequency of escape of water claims, because that's probably, if anything, just going to increase. But if you can reduce the extent of the damage, so i.e. reduce the amount of water that's coming out of the leak, that's where the major opportunity is to make those massive potential cost savings, I think. So there's a real incentive for insurers to engage in this, I think. And I think it's one of those nice, maybe even rare opportunities for potentially small cost outlays. You know, when we compare this to the flood resilience rebuilding, the potential costs there are far more than what we're talking about with these kind of devices that Mark's company provides. With the frequency of these losses and the extent of them, the opportunities for the savings are huge. So there's perhaps a real opportunity for insurers, providers like Mark, and service delivery partners like Belfor to come up with some innovative solutions here, where you can make some massive impacts and provide some, perhaps, dare I say, even more innovative and value-add services for customers, start to break out of the normal insurance mould.
Interesting point, Sam. Ian, I guess what we're looking at here, and we don't want you to give the secrets away from any information you've got from the pilot you're doing, clearly, but, you know, just want to go around, John, at the end to say what's practical and what's realistic now for us within this prevention stroke mitigation sector.
Everything is practical and realistic. I think the main problem we're having is actually getting our customers onboarded to this, to fully understand what the positives are. You know, obviously one of the main things, obviously, we just try to say, obviously to our customer, you know, is that if you do have a serious water leak and you're out of the property for 2 weeks, that's substantial damage, and you could be out of your property for nearly 9 months. So I think what's realistic is everything is realistic at the moment. All of this equipment is there; it's all available, and probably, obviously, as you start putting more and more in, and Mark might be able to confirm this, is that I see that the actual prices of this equipment should start to come down. So everything, you know, is getting the customers on board. It's getting them to understand that we're not just trying to sell it because obviously we want to make a profit out of it. And obviously we're just there to make sure they can't claim as much in the future. And it's just getting the customer to understand, well, that isn't what we're doing. We're just trying to, as Sam said, you know, the claims frequency has always remained static, gone up obviously slightly as you've actually got sort of multiple builds, as you say, your 3-story, 3-bathroom type properties, and obviously modern method of construction. It's getting that message out to the customer. It's a little bit like flood resilience as well. It's getting that message out to the customer to say, you know, having one of these devices fitted, yes, it's going to save the insurer money. That in the long term would be reflected in a discount, reduction of the policy excess, bits and pieces that we can actually do. But obviously in the long term, you know, it's stopping that inconvenience, and it's getting the buy-in from the general public. We've got it on fire alarms now. We've never really got it on theft alarms. We haven't really got buy-in on that one. Flood, we've always said on the flood resilience scheme, because I was actually involved in that when it first started, is that, you know, getting the customer on board just to physically understand. And now we need to look at escape of water and how traumatic it is. And I think basically everything's available. It's all out there. It's all ready to roll. You can go into properties, but it's obviously getting your customer on side.
I think if we can get
and
industry...
the price on side as well, Mark, do you think the price is likely to be reduced as volume picks up and there's a greater take-up of these products?
For us, I don't think that would be the case because of the sort of way we manufacture it and the way it goes and the way it works. We've sold in excess of over 1 million units already through the time of SureStop's history. So, and as we said earlier, that mainly goes into social housing where the tenant doesn't know where the stopcock is and that sort of thing. So we've got a great coverage as it is, and we're already selling a lot of products. So for us, it's the idea of the product that makes the product its price, if you know what I mean. So there's no reduction in volume. It would be the product is the product, and the IoT, the newer version with add-ons on there as well, where we're looking at different things for the intelligence. It may even go up a little bit. The more things you can add to that as an intelligent mind, whether that be fire safety, things like that. So we're trying to develop our product range to suit the market, which will obviously increase our market share, but it wouldn't really sort of change the sort of price point where we are. I wouldn't have thought that would be the case.
I think some of that connects a lot to the internet stuff where it comes in, where there might be advantages. Sam, from your perspective, how practical and realistic is it commercially to get this? And let's go back and say, you know, this doesn't have to be the complex. We don't have to wait till we can put in the complex, expensive stuff. Can we mitigate quickly with the ease of limiting the damage that's going to take place once the inevitable is happening?
At the end of the day, if the will is there and the desire and it's worthwhile and there's a cost benefit, anything's possible at the end of the day. And, you know, the way we're seeing innovation in the world, I wouldn't put any barriers up. Ultimately, from an insurance perspective, with something like this, somebody's got to pay for that product and the installation of that product to try and reduce the risk and reduce the impact of those kind of claims. If we're being brutally honest, the customer needs to pay for that. I think it's getting into the world of kind of maintenance and looking after your property. So, but on the other hand, there is such a huge opportunity to reduce the indemnity spend for insurers. They almost have, I hate to use the phrase, but skin in the game here. So it's in their interest to facilitate this and try and make sure that it's happening. So there's almost a need for these kind of products to be industry recognized. So almost when you're ringing up for your home insurance and they're asking you what kind of locks you have and so on and so forth, they're asking you, do you have one of these devices that's going to be able to shut off your stopcock quickly? And if you say yes, then that's going to reflect on your premium accordingly, and that needs to be widely known. There's then it's probably 1,000,001 ways in which you can roll this out, and there's service partners who are probably itching to support with that and get involved, whether that be pre-incident, as part of buying a policy, or setting something up, and then at the back end once it's happened. So yeah, anything's possible. There's needed a will and a desire, and there needs to be a cost benefit. And the thing that I see with something like this is the costs compared to the potential savings are huge compared to some of the other topics we talked about. So yeah, I don't understand why we're not doing it already, if I'm honest.
And I think just covering what Sam said earlier about going in after there's been a leak and the cost to repair that leak, it would be nice for me to sit down with Sam in that sort of company and say, well, if we did a poll of what was the leak, what was the damage, why was the damage so bad, to understand couldn't find the stopcock, didn't know where it was behind the washing machine, couldn't physically move it, it was seized up, plumber took an hour to come. In all those other instances, if that water could have been turned off within 5 minutes, which is not doable with our product, it's a minute job to flick the water off, what would the cost saving have been for those insurance companies who've had to shell out all of that money, find accommodation, pay for this? Instead of just having a wet patch on the ceiling that can be repaired because the water's turned off, you're going in and you're putting ceilings in, you're putting carpets in, you're putting TVs in. I'd like to understand that and say, if it was, could it have been different? Could the outcome have been different?
To put it into perspective, you could be talking about the difference of maybe a patch repair in the ceiling and doing a bit of clear up with no drying, with no replacement of contents and things like this, to water leaking through an entire house all the way down for a long period of time. So the structure is wet and needs drying. You've got significant amounts of strip out, significant amounts of replacement and reinstatement at the back of that, and potentially significant amounts of drying, not to mention the replacement of contents, potentially, not to mention all the alternative accommodation costs. It's an absolute no-brainer, isn't it, surely?
It is, yeah. It is big exposure, and I guess people in underwriting price that have to look at that in terms of not just the extent of the price, but the volume that happens and get up. And I'm not going to pretend I'm knowledgeable in that area. I'm not at all. But I guess let's put the last word to Ian. He personally uses such products, etc. as well. Do you think the answer here is to start with a limited, perhaps with the, let's start with the first bit of mitigation and make it easy to stop the water. And then as that proves it, we can begin to prove to the market to go further down the route within the leak prevention world, really?
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, as Mark said, they have lots of products at SureStop, and obviously some of them are quite cost effective as well. And I think that's obviously why I'm doing this pilot, is to just really understand not just what the take up is. We would hope that we would actually get enough units out there that there may be 1 or 2 escape of water claims that occur, because obviously then we can actually then start to measure what the actual savings will be by having this device fitted. I think, what we're doing at the moment is we're offering this product absolutely free. So it's really important to us is that if we're offering a product for free, is to have a look at the take up. That's the first thing we actually need to look at. We then need to understand if the customers then got to start paying for that product, what we anticipate will be the take up. That's when we then start going back to those people that have had that device installed. Hopefully they've used it, that they've liked that the product's been fitted. And we're going to get feedback from them just to actually tell us as well, if you had to pay for it, what would be your thought process? So as part of the pilot that I've actually arranged for Saga Acorn customers, is that is what we're just really trying to fully understand, is what the customer thinks. And I say at the moment where they've had an escape of water, absolutely, they're really up for this product to be installed. If they haven't, then it's quite difficult for them to understand what benefit they personally will get out of the product. So yeah, the pilot's going to be a 12-month product. So by all means, I'll come back in 12 months' time and give you a little bit more feedback. What I'd also say on the with regards to insurers, Sam, they're already asking that question. So if you go onto some of the actual price comparison sites, you will find out quite often that there is a question to say, have you got this sort of device fitted? So there are insurers already who are obviously not probably actively promoting the installation, but there are insurers out there that must be making some sort of adjustment on their premium when one of these devices is fitted. And just lastly, Alan, I think it's about getting information through. I think up to this point in time, most of the information that we're getting through, most of the quantum evidence, the MI, etc., is coming from America, because obviously these are really big in America. So that's where it's coming from. But obviously the type of properties that they have are completely different to the properties that we have. So yeah, I think we all need to look forward, and I hope to see these products installed into properties going forward, because it will have an impact on premiums. As we actually work to a target loss ratio. We're not going to be sort of taking money out of people's pockets. You know, if we can actually find something that we can do, and obviously Sam says we get the customer to install it, and we recognise that they've actually installed it, and we then do something to the premium, I think that's probably the way forward.
Thanks, that's great. Well, I mean, any questions you've got for Ian, Sam, or Mark, please drop me a note at alan@iloveclaims.com. We'd delighted to even pass any of the questions on to them. They're really good. Thank you to Ian, Sam, and Mark. That was really interesting. It opens up. I think there's more going on than we think, but I'm not sure people are sharing the information they would yet. So thanks, Ian, for sharing your information. That's great. Sam, for sharing the thinking, and Mark for being realistic in what's out there rather than just everybody coming on and going for the big bang win, which you know, just might not be an achievable target for us at the moment. So thanks very much. Again, any questions you've got to alan@iloveclaims.com. Quick plug again for the ILC lunch, 1st of October. If you want to get on the waiting list for this sold out event, please contact me again. And of course, for the conference, the 11th of November at the Ricoh Arena, which is going to be a fantastic get-together of 450 claims professionals. We're really looking forward to that. In the meantime, thanks for listening. All the views expressed here always are expressed by the people themselves, their own opinions, and it's only by sharing these opinions that I think ILC were able to offer something different from everybody else. We're here to let other people talk, debate, and hopefully make us better tomorrow from what we learned today. Thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Cheers, thank you.